So yeah, I wake up and I go on kind of these. And I'm surprised that I'm coherent as I am, but I'm like scrambled in the focus of one particular area. And I was referencing Tom Selleck, but I never finished my sentence in that prior one where, he saw the full employment of a denaturing occurring that seemed to subvert and go against natural law, i.e., putting the father down, reducing the father, not only the father's role in society, as to say, to go back to these references alluded by these so-called master masons, whatever, in the master key system, Charles F. Haenel, as to say that you are a theoretical abstract ego if you don't take on the position, the title, right? And but this is where it gets interesting, is that we're going to tell you what that title is, decade by decade, era by era. You don't feed into it. You don't know any better. You're not tapped into nature that goes beyond what I was alluding to as well, is like this Wiccan concept or idea that we arrived at, and then we were subverted, and then no longer had a metaphysical focus. It went into the textbooks. People are studying this under the laws of secular science, and that secular science is even beginning to bridge back to and look like a certain sort of dogma, right? That we constantly have to reinvent the conceptualization of how we approach something in a very scientific, rational, or secular way, where we are removing, right? So now secularism is supplanting and putting back the metaphysical properties, right? Where you have these agnostic or even more so atheist scientists who invariably, as part of this whole thing, are studying the most pertinent phenomenology, right? But I do think that it is important to take God out of the equation entirely. I think that was a like Nietzsche, all of his work points at that. Like God is dead, but he wasn't pronouncing God is dead. He's saying you killed God. You killed God by becoming greater than your God, right? Even philosophically. And I think what he was afraid of is what people are still afraid of, that we would have a society that was godless, but now talking about telekinesis, these indigo children, so to speak, right? These telepathic children, these people that were tapping into the ether and yet were godless. So I think there was like this huge fear that he had of that, and you could see why, because you're talking about people who are going in and remote viewing into the subliminal areas that really have no grounded belief systems, right? But they are just following their natural prompts. But are they natural? Like I say, there's something very unnatural about nature, and the fact that if you can isolate a field like we have been subject to, if you can manipulate that field, if you can put a symbol within that field that everybody knowingly or unknowingly reverts back to, i.e., the inverted pentagram, right? And why the only reason that the inverted pentagram seems to have the type of power that it does, right, is because there's a reversion. It's a default. I wrote about this for years. There's a default mechanism, right? So we 100% live inside of a computational system that is constantly looking at values and asserting values and then rerouting available resources. But the problem with it is that it's a closed system that is not recruiting, right? It's being self-organizing, and that is a very feminine element. It's no longer using the linear processes of the male component as to penetrate through the pleroma and to search ever further out into the depths of space, and even more so multidimensionally. And that you have to see that this academic unlocking, right, that this conjuring up of this um, this treatise, but this apologetic letter that is both explaining its methodology and also writing out its discourse, right, as to say we understand this, right. So there is a fundamental understanding always that didn't need to be said, where in order to connect with this energy, I have to become the item, the event, the thing, right? The moment. And I need to prove through memetics, writing down the system, that I am this, and that I am not, I'm therefore entitled to the energetics that you will imprint in my society, right? That I recognize that this is missing, that this is unnatural, right? That I'm able to like Nietzsche, I'm able to create the framework to the Ubermensch, but where's the Ubermensch? Where's it at? Where's the beef? And so you get into the process that I think made Nietzsche nearly catatonic for the last 11 years of his life, right? Where you're looking at, oh, you got too close. You got too close to the hot pot, literally the cauldron. And what's happening is you're witnessing a subversion, but we don't care about what you say. In fact, we're gonna employ and deploy an army of our own, Aquino, right? Majestic 12. We're going to employ an army of witches that think that they are militaristically inclined into a ductilio or punctilio methodology, right? Where they are 100% just being taken over by a mind that is a sabotaging agent that could really better be looked at, like even still. And I've heard people talking about Rudolf Steiner more recently, particularly Jason Giorgiani, but you could see where like Jason Giorgiani and I agree on very fundamental truths, but when it comes down to it, he really is like identifying himself, saying, "I guess I am a Satanist," you know. He's aligning himself with the era, like why resist it, right? Where he's saying, and this shows you the fine line, right, between what you believe in. Like if you believe in with other faith, you believe in the phenomenology that more is to come, as opposed to, okay, we've uncovered this stark truth that witches and witchcraft are being chosen by this entity, this mind, right? You could say this original Boltzmann brain, where the universe still hasn't been completed yet, i.e., the cosmos, right? And that maybe it's left incomplete, which leads people to the abstract notions of art, surrealism, and so forth, as to say this is good enough. But then you get somebody who, from a very rationalistic, more secular state of mind, where they're approaching that has a very high IQ. They're usually killed off very young. They're scientists, but they're brought in to deliver certain information, and they're not allowed to. They are barred from fully living or expressing a life, because the only people that are able to do that are the people who are muted through and by way of their lack of intelligence quotient. Even more so, the balance is, and it is thermodynamic. It's saying, look, we're going to use thermodynamics against people, and the delivery of this is that if you want to be smarter, well, you have the same amount of energy as this other person. This person's putting it into their own self-will and the promulgation of their own folly and idiocy, but they're still able to functionally go about and employ through employment in society to go about a certain business practice, right, where they're feeding into a centralized system, right? So the same energy is afforded to the person who's got 185 IQ, as well as the person who's got a 200 IQ, like Chris Langan, right? And to say that we're only going to allow you and allot to you. So this is what makes Dr. Michael Levin's work extraordinary, is that by super energizing a person like this, they would have full understanding and support of their faculties. What would happen in such a case, right? So this is like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, where now you have to exogenously search for an electrifying agent, right? And to know exactly what the amplitudes would be in order to supercharge this already very high intelligence. And, when you look at somebody who's older, like Chris Langan, there's a biofeedback loop with his emotional intelligence quotient as well that Daniel Goleman, got into. Social intelligence, emotional intelligence, where you're looking at somebody who could become, like, when you talk about the Boltzmann brain, right? That a brain would develop and arise much faster than the completion of the quantitization, right? So when we talk about a brain and we look at what a brain really is, aren't we just talking about a nervous system, right? So this goes back to the master key system, right? Where this ganglionic mass behind the solar plexus is really where the self resides, right? Really, to elude the spinous system, the vagus nerve, the pons, that you're talking about a singular entity or a brain residing there, right? And then all the mechanisms that shortcut to response deeds in reactivity through the amygdala or the limbic system, right? That, and then if that's all you had, right? If you didn't have executive powers or executive process, that secretions from the endocrine system, and even more so, not the functional aspects of the endocrine system, but the ability for the blood-brain barrier, right, to be employed as well, and possibly the neocortex and the executive mind to be employed as well. The caudate patanum, right, that Gary Nolan talks about, like that. It's not just the right and left brain mechanisms, but there's a balancing out between the right and left brain supposition, where you have certain matter, right? So energizing the barrier between that is probably where a lot of this research is going to go, and I think it's going to get super freaky, because I think that is where the liminal area where this telekinetic energies is going to be fully supported and found, to the point where you will see the human aura once. And if you think that this hasn't happened, when you look at these huge leaps and bounds that occurred, and like these covert programs have access to everyone and all of their medical records, all their medical data, and this is like an 8 billion strong test group, where now these data sets, right? When you look, that's why Cliff's High information is, it's a hack. Like, it sounds like it's very archaic, like that he's not able to go in, and then even him getting ill and trying to do many talks as he can, but even still, he's not progressive in his field like he wanted to be when he had youth and vigor, and even more so, you could see how he's being suppressed, right? But we're talking about open data sets, open AI information that is used more from an analog sense, where no AI is not getting a hold of this information first. We are looking for cursive, like precursors and so forth. We are looking for data sets, right, of reoccurring information, almost like looking at it like the Bible code, right, where you're skipping a certain number, and the probability factor goes up by huge margins when you look at, oh, this is spelling this out, this is spelling this out backwards, right? So I liken to what Cliff High is doing as hacking into the mind of the emotional responses of the human beings, but now with social engineering, the same types of responses aren't seen in social media, right? You might, like, even on Reddit and other open, so-called open forums, you can only do certain things. So you've got these legislative laws of agreement where if you say something that insults someone, that information is taken off, right? So um, OpenAI is even assaulted on this to where it's like, you got to see that, like, Facebook and Meta, to be charged with using, and then you look directly at ChatGPT, and you see that, okay, you cheated and used data information, hacking into people's private data, and it's like, that has to happen. Don't you want the software to be able to work with the hardware in an instantaneous sort of way? You say that you want the product, you say that you want the benefits, but then you're not willing to go under exposure and to reveal the rawness and the truth of who you really are, because unless you do that, if it's filtered, you're going to get back filtered responses.